Ma'am, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Ma'am, can you suggest us that how much time we have to give on the pre-feasibility requirements? That 1 month or 2 months? Because if the time limits is goes on the discussions on the ideas, so what is the minimum time limit we have to give on the pre-feasibility study?
So, Sangeeta,
Yes,
there's
ma'am.
no defined time. The thing is, how long do you take to collect the data? Now, pre-feasibility report, you might hire a consultant to do it for you. The bigger companies do that. When they want to start new projects, they hire consultants. They'll be making feasibility reports for them. Now, how much time is not so important when you as an entrepreneur are doing it, right? You might not be able to afford a consultant, or you might take help of a consultant for some things there. Uh, but then, as an entrepreneur who wants to start a new business and who does not already have experience in the market, I would say, first of all, you have to be deeply involved in this whole research process, because you need to understand your customers, your market, the business stakeholders personally. Because the way a consultant looks, so you know how entrepreneurs differ from employees. Entrepreneurs have a different outlook towards things than what employees have. You need to have an independent, different outlook towards whatever you see, the interactions you have. So you should have first hand knowledge of your customers, your market, your industry, and not rely on some third person doing it. It is good for big companies to do that, not good for a first time entrepreneur to do it. uh, Now, saying that, what I mean is, how much time you take to collect the relevant data. You have to, by the end of it, see, there are two things which are for certain indications that you have done your you have done enough survey, or you have collected enough data. Is when there are two symptoms. One is you become very clear and confident in your mind as to how you will be running. That whole blueprint is now printed in your mind. It might not be there on paper yet, but you get more and more clarity about your idea, how feasible it is. But you have to have a non-biased outlook. You cannot be having a biased outlook of looking. You're not, there's something called conformity bias. You only take inputs which conform to your idea or your viewpoint, not the data that contradicts your viewpoint, right? You have to be non-biased about it. By the time having that non-biased objective analysis, you get a clarity in your mind. Yes, this is what I want to do. This has a lot of scope and I want to go ahead with it. One is that clarity will appear gradually as you study it, or you'll keep getting discouraged as the data comes there. So you will start having that intuition whether you are getting encouraged or you are getting discouraged to follow that idea. Second thing is, when you are sitting and discussing it with an expert, with one of the stakeholders, your idea with one of the stakeholders. Now, one thing that is very clear from this, when I say you will be sitting and discussing your idea with the stakeholders, means idea has no sanctity. So people who say I have a great idea and I don't want to share, otherwise someone will steal it, is all bogus. You can have any number of ideas, and if anybody can steal it, the day you will start doing it, anybody can steal it then also, because then it will be in the market and everyone will know it. So if the idea is so simple to replicate, if it is so commonsensical, then anybody can do it, then it's not a great idea to follow. One. So if you have an idea which requires some effort, some expertise, and you're ready to work hard, which not everyone is willing to, so then you should not fear if somebody else is doing your idea. If you are well prepared and you are meant to do that idea, you are the one who will be doing it. So let that never be discouraged कि मेरा idea पता चल जाएगा दूसरों को. So one, that is not an idea. You discuss your idea with as many people as possible to take their feedback, because then you'll get the real feedback. There's always this fear of somebody else taking it, but that the market is too big. There's place for everyone. So that should not be your thing to worry. It's more about how well you can execute it. So once you have started taking that feedback from people, and you sit and talk to them, people who are from the same industry, when you feel your knowledge level or your depth of knowledge is same as theirs, then that means you have surveyed the market enough. So when you are sitting and discussing your idea with an expert, with an investor, with a industry person, with a customer, with your competitor, you realize that you know as much as they know, or you can make a knowledgeable discussion about it with that person. That means you have done enough market survey and now you know the business. So these are two things which will give you a sign that you have done your job, you have done your job enough. There's no time to it. The more time you spend per day, so most of the things are done in man hours, and not in number of days. So how much time you are spending towards it per day, and different people might be having different speeds to assimilate. It also depends on the kind of industry or how complex your business is. If you are into a manufacturing setup, there's a whole lot of thing that is involved. In a service industry, it might not be that much. If you're just doing trading, then it is all the more easier. If it is a hobby, say I am a gardener and I want to open a nursery, then it's easier. I just need to go and see what all nurseries exist, and what is selling there and what is not selling there, and at what price point people are selling, what are the margins involved, what is my investment, etc. So it depends on the complexity of the idea as well. So if it's a complex business with huge operational requirements and more stakeholders involved, you'll need more time. If it is a simple business with a small stakeholder requirement, then it will take lesser time. But I would say it's wise to take that minimum a month would be there, because you will also be doing secondary survey through internet. You will be doing a lot of online research of periodicals, of all the reports, industry reports, etc., to understand the industry and its trends, its projections, what are people saying about it. So you have to be aware of the macro as well as micro level data of that industry. So I don't know if you understand what I meant by that. At least people who have management background will know. Macro is when you understand it in great detail from a bird's eye view of how that industry is going nationally and internationally, from that perspective, economic perspective. And micro is when you understand from a single unit how it operates and how it grows. So you understand the dynamics at the ground level as well as at the macro level, how it is linked with the whole economic scenario and how that industry is working in the entire economic scenario, right? So there are different stages through which any industry passes. So your business will also be going accordingly. And these are the concepts that you'll be studying later. So it also depends on the complexity of the idea. But I would say a month, even if you are dedicating your whole day to it, at least a month should be preparing to do it.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Yes, Aishwarya, please tell
uh,
me.
ma'am, you have told us today that we have to make a report where
Mm-hmm.
we have to mention our idea, and then
Mm-hmm.
then about market survey, and then we have to submit it to you for pre-feasibility test, and I mean then
So
the
you have to
business
make
model.
all these things about that idea. You take an idea, you
Mhm.
do some market survey. You can do a secondary one. You don't, since you're not going to do the business after this, you can do a secondary market research about it. Then and the factors that are involved, that will be covered in other sessions. Then you can prepare a pre-feasibility report about it without actually going into the market and interviewing the customers and all that. You can do it from the secondary research data that is available, right? And some of your own experience and analysis. That is why I'm saying choose a field that you are familiar with. When you are selecting an idea, take a field that you are familiar with. Say I am interested in gardening, I choose the idea that I'll be opening a nursery and I'll be selling plants, right? Something like that. Or say I have a piece of land, I say I'll be growing flowers in it and I'll be selling flowers in the market. So something that you are very familiar with. You are a student, you take up something about related with a student, that I'll be giving online tuitions to students, I'll be taking English classes for students. Do something that you are comfortable with, you are familiar with, then you will not need to go and do the primary research with the stakeholders, because you can do it, you already are aware of that field, right? So
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, last day I have told you that I want to work with IoT agriculture and by irrigation. But
Right.
however, this project is too big and I don't have the access to the lab. So that's why I am going to work on some different idea, like an online app which will make clothes according to ladies' body shape. Different people have different body shapes. Like some people have apple shape, bell shape, and some people have hourglass shape. But in our market, there are single shape of clothes for everyone. So that's why I want to make the app.
So,
But for
Aishwarya,
that,
you
how
can
to do the
even
survey?
uh, Aishwarya, you can also do it for your idea on drip education. You just take it as drip education, and there's lot of content available, secondary data available on drip education, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So there are some businesses which might not require so much of primary data, because you're not taking it to market immediately. You can restrict the primary data and base your research more on secondary data. You can still find out the market size of it, who are the competitors who are already doing it, how much is the market demand, right? So what are the costs involved? All those things you can find out in secondary reports as well, in your secondary research on internet as well. So if that is an idea that you want to pursue, it's a bright time to actually do some research on that idea, because that is of your interest and that will be of utility later on as well. So at least the secondary research part you can definitely do and find out inputs from there. So primary research you can do later to validate that idea, but secondary research you can still do and prepare the pre-feasibility based on it.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, there are lots of research paper available, but those research are done abroad, not in India. For a primary report, I can refer them, but then it would not be understandable if that will be same for India or not.
I'm sure there would be research on Indian agricultural scenario as well. See, what happens is sometimes you find exact data that you want in secondary research especially, and sometimes you have to derive your data, right? So there will
Yes,
definitely
ma'am.
be data around Indian agricultural, different kind of land holdings, what is the cover of land, how much of it is irrigated, how much of it is unirrigated or natural irrigation is there, how much of it is has the this one, and how many are using modern irrigation techniques. Some of it would be available even for India. Maybe you'll have to search it more thoroughly, but if you go to some of these research papers that are published by a lot of institutions, research institutions or industry reports that are there, this data, some of it you can extract from there.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Like
Yeah.
in the previous class, you said we can approach incubators. Like,
Huh.
research.
So
Can we do that? No?
you can. Okay, so Pranunita, where are you located?
I'm in Bangalore, Karnataka.
Oh, Bangalore is the startup hub. What sector incubator do you require? It would be having all sectors.
Like, food processing, or I want to some generate some from the waste, some from the solid waste. I'm just
Okay.
planning just that.
Okay. Food processing and solid waste.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look for incubators in Bangalore, you'll find at least 15 of them located in Bangalore. So that is why I was asking if somebody, maybe Kannauj doesn't have one. Kanpur also has IIT Kanpur. Bangalore is the incubator hub. So Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, they are full of incubators. There are lots of them located in educational institutions as well as private incubators. So Bangalore also has lot of private incubators there. Dedicated to food technology, I am not sure. It depends on. So Bangalore would be having biotech incubator, design incubator. It has IT incubators. Even this IIM Bangalore has a sector agnostic social incubator. It has a social incubator. So if your idea has a social impact, say waste conversion or something, you should go for this women entrepreneurship program in IIM Bangalore. So they have this specific program with Melinda Gates Foundation, which is meant only for women entrepreneurs. And their focus is generally social impact startups. So you can find great opportunity there and apply to their women entrepreneurship program.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, ma'am. I think you should continue, ma'am.
So pick up a simple idea, start applying these principles and see what you come up with. Take a document, start jotting down things under these heads, and you will learn as you go, because this whole workshop is teaching you about all the things that we are talking about. So there's some management jargon. Don't get bothered by it, because you'll learn all of it by the end of the workshop, and I'll try to keep it simple. Now, let me take a practical example, right? Instead of before proceeding with this pre-feasibility report, and then we'll see how much of it is applied, how much of it is not applied. Okay, so say I want to start, say my hobby is gardening and I want to start a nursery, or I want to start gift a plant kind of a thing, where instead of giving a bouquet, you start giving potted plants, decorative potted plants, which people can keep and which can last for longer. Now, suppose that's my idea. Now I want to understand the market. Now I want to understand whether people want that kind of thing or not. So I'll see how many other people are doing it in India. What has the response of the customers been? What is their sales figure, or are they doing well or not generally, right? If there is someone I know, say I go to neighborhood nursery, say I want to start it in my location, I am based out of Lucknow, so I want to start it in Lucknow. So I'll go to Lucknow market, where all the flowers are available, the plants are available in the nurseries or the places where potted plants are sold. And I go and generally chit chat with the owners of that plant shops and find out what's the response, what kind of plants people buy, how much is the demand. I go as a customer and I see, I find out the pricing. I want to give this one, what's the cost of this? And I see the different plants that he's selling. Which plants are more in number, which are less in number. If they are more in number, means that is in greater demand. That is why he's prepared more pots of that plant. Some of them he has kept in smaller numbers, means that's not in great demand. Then how is he pricing the plants? So I go and do that in multiple shops on different days and try to see the pattern. Are certain localities selling at a higher price, certain localities at a lower price? What is the kind of shop, and how is the cost related with the shop or the locality where he's selling? What are the kind of plants that people are prefer? Do they prefer gifting cut flowers over potted plants? What is the sale figure there? What is the sale figure here? So you are trying to create, that's my primary research, right? Going and talking to them. Maybe you go to one of these shops and you find some of the customers there to buy, and you start chit-chatting with them. कि अगर I think this is too expensive, or I would prefer to give a flower instead. And then he or she will say, the flowers dry out so soon, the plant will last forever. Or you'll see the reasoning behind that, right? You'll see how they are marketing, how these shops market and attract the customers. So those things you study, the behavior you study. Then there are reports that you can go and access online and see flower market in India, flower cultivation in India. You might not get directly about potted plants. I might want to sell potted plants for gifting, small beautiful containers with small plants which people can put in their drawing rooms or decorate it somewhere. But I'll not find data on that. Secondary data would not be available on that. It might be available on flower cultivation in India, how it's growing, the export potential. Those kind of reports will be available. Then probably I'll try and make out as to whether I can convert, whether my location is the right location to do it, what location should I choose from where I should give it, at what price point, what is the cost incurred. I go and find out what all it entails, right? It requires peat, it requires manure, it requires soil, it requires some nice pots. Where will I get them from? What is their cost? So what will be the cost incurred in raw material? So if I want to prepare 10 say pots, how much is the cost that will be incurred in preparing it? What will be the cost of the pot? What will be the cost of soil, manure, the peat, or whatever other things, the plant itself, the sapling, and then the cost of running a shop. So what kind of shop will it be? Electricity, the construction of shop. So whatever is the one-time cost, say construction of a shop, is my capital expenditure, right? Whatever is the recurring cost every time I sell, which is decided by each piece I create, or which is a running cost which happens again and again, say my electricity bill. It's a recurring cost. It's an operational cost. Now, from the proceeds of the sale, so how do I generate my income? From selling these pots, right? What is my cost? Can I sell it at a price greater than the cost I have incurred in creating a pot? Can I sell a pot at a higher cost? If I can't, then I can't make profits. And my profits don't just have to cover the cost of the pot, of creating the pot. It has to also cover the cost of my labor. It has to cover the cost if I'm employing some other labor. It has to cover the cost of my electricity. If a shop is rental, it has to cover the cost of rents. So unless I sell 500 pots every month, the profit will not be enough to cover all my running cost of that business, right? So the margin is the margin between selling price and the cost in which I have created that pot is has to cover all those costs. So the cost that I come to, is it market competitive cost, or is the market selling lower than my cost? So you'll see that street vendors sell cheaper than the showrooms. Why? Because street vendors do not have overhead cost. Overhead cost because they do not have a shop to pay for. They don't have the rental income. They don't have these labor to pay. They might not be having an air conditioned kind of a thing. They might not be having display marketing expenses. So their pots will be cheaper. So if I incur all those costs, the cost goes higher. How do I now make my cost competitive, right? Or who are the people I should be tapping? Or where should I be selling where I can bargain for that kind of a cost? Or how do I decrease the overheads, expenses that are there? So those are the decisions that I need to make before I can get into the business. Unless I can work out profitability, which will cover all my operational cost, plus the money I have invested as the capital expense, it doesn't make sense for me to go into that business. Say now, what is the break-even point? I am saying only if I sell 500 pots a month, can the profit cover the cost of the electricity, cost of the rental, cost of my travel to bring the raw material, cost of my own time and labor. So till the time I sell 500 pots, I do not get enough cost to make my operational cost meet. So that is operational break-even point, right? Now, from day one, I won't be selling 500 pots. It's not feasible, right? So I'll make a timeline. Say first I'll take 5 pots. I'll sell it to my friends and relatives. I'll say, you try this out, right? Gift this one instead of gifting this to encourage me. If because of my personal relations, they take. Word of mouth publicity goes. The person who gets it gets to know they have got from my shop. Maybe that some people passing by find that attractive and they stop by to make inquiries. Some of them get interested and buy it. So from 5, it goes to 10 next month. It goes to 15 next month. By the time it reaches 500, maybe it will take 7 months, 8 months. Till that time, I am making operational losses, right? So all the money for the rental, for the electricity, for my labor, for the transport, even the cost I have incurred in creating the things would have gone from my pocket, right? So I need that working capital till the break-even point of 500 sales is achieved. There will be some losses that are happening, and that losses have to go from my pocket. I have to have provision money for those losses till the time 500 figure is reached and crossed. So when I plan for business, I have to also calculate my break-even point, because till the break-even point is achieved, I will have to invest money into the business. After 500 pots, I have achieved 500 pots sale, I will start incurring profits. So my operational cost will be covered. Whatever is after 500, I will start generating profit, which will be a return on my initial investment that I made in setting up the shop. Right? I have also invested 2 lakhs, say, in setting up my shop. So that 2 lakh every month in form of 1,000, 20,000, 10,000 rupees will start coming back as a return on the initial investment capital that I made. Commonsensical? No jargon involved. This is just commonsensical of how I will go about creating my pot decorative plant selling business, gifting up plant business, right? So what do I do now? I also try to see the trends. What am I trying to find out when I am trying to actually do a market survey on say how the what is the growth in flower market, right? And how are the sales growing? Yeah, how many people are getting into this selling flowers or growing flowers? Why am I doing that? I'm doing that to see the future trends of the industry. Are more people going towards it? Is there a growth in that industry, or is the industry receding, or is it mature industry? So industry might be at different stages. There might be industries which are at sunrise phase. They are just rising and growing. The startup industry is one such industry, right? In growth phase. And that is why you have so many startup programs these days. So more and more opportunity are getting created there. Then industry might be in mature phase. The rate of growth is slow. The industry already has reached, is already more saturated, right? There are not too much market demand supply gap. So that is when you are entering a mature industry. So you try to guess as to where the industry is also going, what the competitors are doing, how they are doing it, how I need to do, how do I make my place in that market. Now, now this is going to be different for different businesses, right? If you're a startup business or a technology business, it might be different. If you are, say, in my case, what I have told is a very small cottage industry, kind of a home-based business kind of a thing. So I've taken a simple example, but things keep getting complex depending on what is your business, right? If you are into trading, you will need to know from where you will get your supplies, how will you get your, how will you market and get retail shops attached to you, how will you manage the cash flow, what is the security and the money you need to invest in inventory? How will you recover that money? What are your margins? So with MSME businesses, generally these practices are already set out. With a startup business, these practices are generally not set out. You have to define it because you are coming with an innovative idea or an innovative kind of a solution or a service. Now, you can't say that since it is innovative, I do not have competition. See, competition is not there in product or service. Competition is in addressing the need of the person. If I am coming up with a Write-O-Meter pen that says how many kilometers you have written with one pen, right? You can't say I have no competition because no other pen measures how many kilometers a person is writing with the refill. It means I have competition with all other pens in the world who do not measure how much the pen is writing. I have competition with all those pens. I also have competition with all the pencils, all the other writing materials. So there is direct competition, there is indirect competition. What is the need of the customer? The need of the customer is to pen down information or idea on paper. How can you fulfill that need? There are various ways to fulfill that need, right? Mine is one of the ways. So my competition is not just pen. My competition is fountain pen. My competition is pencil. My competition is all other things that a person uses to pen down his idea. So if a Write-O-Meter pen, you have introduced a new feature to make differentiate yourself from the competition, to make it attractive for students, say, who find every new thing very attractive and interesting. See, my wrote 2 kilometers, yours wrote 1 kilometer. So it's a fancy thing for children to increase the sales. You have introduced a new feature, but what is the need being met? So that is where you need to distinguish your need. A person does not buy pen to measure how much the ink writes. A person buys a pen so that he can write. So the need you are addressing is not measuring distance. Your need you are addressing is writing on paper. So understand what is the need or the problem of the customer that you are addressing. So when I say I will sell potted plants, gift a plant thing, right? So my competitor is not just the people who are selling potted plants, same decorative potted plants as a gift. My competitor is all the people who are selling plants in a nursery. My competitor is all the people who are selling flowers. My competitors, indirect competitors, are also people who are selling other gift items because I'm selling a gift item. So all people who are selling gift item are also my indirect competitors. So I'm saying that you gift a thing. That thing traditionally is an object, a toy, a cloth, or something, or a chocolate or a flower. I'm saying instead of gifting bouquets and flowers, gift plant instead. It will last longer and it will be a more stable thing or a better environmental friendly thing to gift. So my competitor is all of them, not just one. So you need to understand that even when you are making an innovation, you still have traditional ways of addressing that need. You still have traditional solutions available to that problem. If human being has a need, if human being has a problem, he would be meeting that need or he would be addressing that problem in some way. You might be offering through that innovation a better way to address it. But the traditional way of addressing it is also your competitor. Why? Because it is difficult to change habits. I am comfortable using a feature phone. It was difficult for me to switch over to a smartphone because I still find talking over a feature phone much more comfortable than a smartphone, जिसमें कभी hold button press हो जाता है, कभी mute button press हो जाता है मेरे कान से, and I don't even realize it, right? So I say कि for talking, still feature phone is better than a smartphone. Now, so the need is communication. For communication, I say a feature phone is better than a smartphone. But now the phone is not just a communication tool. It's a camera. It's a internet thing. It's an entertainment piece. So it's a file sharing device. It's a mini computer in your hand. So now communication is not the only need that is being met. There are multiple needs being met by that device, right? So when I talk of competition, even when I'm bringing up an innovation, and these days technology changes so fast, or innovations are happening at such a rapid pace, that if you're not up to date and you don't keep reinventing yourself, very soon you get obsolete and you are thrown out of the market. So at all times, you need to keep reinventing yourself. If the traditional camera, digital camera is already out of market. The aim and shoot cameras are already out, because now the phone cameras are much better than the digital cameras I had. So I never use the digital cameras. My phone camera results are much better. So it's already out. So what have the camera companies done? They have brought in now these what do you call, the manual cameras, the lens cameras. So people who are actually interested in photography, or who want to take good quality pictures, so phone everyone has, but that is not something everyone has. It starts from 35,000, 40, 30, 35,000. So only some people who are interested will have it. So they reinvented themselves. So they are still there, else they would die. Earlier they had roll cameras, and there were companies who were selling rolls, and I have used that, right? So there are companies who are making rolls for cameras, film cameras, and we used to buy 3-4 rolls every trip, or every event, every occasion. So the volume of sales, just imagine anyone who had camera, how many rolls he would be buying. So now those companies are closed because roll cameras went out. Once digital cameras came in, the roll cameras were out. So all those companies got closed. You already know that traditional example of Xerox, how Canon beat Xerox once the patent was over, because Xerox did not reinvent itself. It kept sitting on its patent, and Canon improvised. And Canon photocopiers became much more common than Xerox, and we still call it Xeroxing. But actually, Xerox is a company which is not performing that well, right? There are other companies that overtook. So that's one thing that one has to know. Ki, even this is not an exercise that you do once. This market intelligence is something that you will need throughout the life cycle of the business. You can't say that I have done it once, because market changes fast, technology changes fast, everything incurs a cost when you change in a business. So you have to really be aware and ahead of times. If you are an entrepreneur, you have to have a vision which can see what's coming, right? So you have to change your outlook as to what has happened. You cannot be a laggard. You are a leader. You lead changes. So that's one thing. And there are some things which are MSME in nature, which are already well established. They have been there. They'll be there for a long time to come. But things are disrupting fast, right? So you need to be aware of that as well. Okay, so anything else that you want to ask? Because now I want you to actually think of that idea, and like I told you, how I will go about researching about my idea, and the data I get, I'll be putting it in my market survey report. You need to start doing it for your idea. Only then will this workshop be fruitful. Once you start applying all the principles on any one idea of your choice, you will know how to apply it on any idea that you want to implement in future. You need to do it once, practice it once, then you might not use it. But whenever you want to go ahead and do something of your own, you can use the same process for examining that idea as well. Okay, coming back to what we were seeing. Okay, so this is a gist of the entire session. This is just a summary. We'll do this first, and then we'll take up each component separately. So one is importance of feasibility study in project management. It is used to determine the viability of an idea, such as ensuring that a project is legally and technically feasible as well as economically justifiable. In other words, words, it tells us whether a project is worth the investment, right? So that's the purpose. There are 5 areas that we basically see. This can vary. Let me tell you, there are different people who talk of different feasibilities. I've just taken one of the templates. Some places you might find this technical feasibility it has. Some places you might find financial feasibility instead of economic feasibility. Some places you might find marketing feasibility. Some places you might find some other feasibility included here. Scheduling feasibility, that's there. So mostly these are 5 basic things that will be there in all feasibility reports. You will test the feasibility on 5 grounds at least, 5 to 6 grounds at least. The market one is not available here. So we have already discussed in one line what this is. Okay. And then these are the things you see. What are the possible constraints that you might face, that the project may face when you try to implement it? You will identify those areas. Say there are internal project constraints like technology involved, the budget and the resources that you have might not meet what the project requires. So there might be internal constraints, there might be internal corporate constraints like financial, marketing, export, etc. Okay, you might not be having the resources for marketing or the budget for marketing. There can be external constraints which are related to the environment and the environmental conditions or the regulations that are involved in the business. You might not have the say. For instance, you want to open a lending site, okay, or you want to open a small saving bank or something. The cost of getting an NBFC license, just a lending NBFC license, is rupees 2 crore to 5 crores just to get that license from RBI. You might not be having that kind of money to invest in. So you might not be able to comply with that regulation. What are the other things? There might be other ways of doing it through an NGO format or something, which does not require RBI licensing. But that's not a very dependable format in the sense that banks do not lend to such formats because they don't trust it, because it's not well guarded by RBI norms. So the compliances are not there. So when the compliances are not there, it is difficult for that organization to raise funds for further lending. So those might be the constraints because of which you can't go ahead. So I'll give you a live example. So one of the incubators, I was in this fintech incubator by SIDBI that at IIM Lucknow, which was my last tenure. So there's a company which came to us, which was into this digital lending platform. So the entrepreneur was really good technically. He was an alumni of IIM Lucknow, and he had worked for an NBFC, and he knew how the lending landscape worked. And he had worked for a microfinance company, and he now wanted to get into a digital lending platform. He coded, he invested his money, personal loan. He took a personal loan and invested his money in developing that technology platform. And once the platform was ready, suddenly a regulation came from RBI, which brought in the rule that all the digital lending platforms will now have to take an NBFC digital lending license. Now, for taking an NBFC digital lending license, you need 2 crores as deposit to be able to obtain that license. Now, the whole startup idea fizzled out because he had already taken 30 lakhs of loan to develop the platform, and it was ready to operate. He had already, he was ready to launch it. And suddenly this new regulation came, and now he cannot launch it because he does not have the NBFC license. So he tries to convert it into a, what does he do? Okay, I'll tell you the real scenario. This is a real scenario. What does he try to do? He tries to convert this into a crowdfunding platform. Now that the technology platform is ready, what does he do with it? Now he cannot use it for digital lending. So he tries to tweak that platform and convert it into a crowdfunding platform, because still crowdfunding is not a registered entity, does not require RBI registration. So crowdfunding can be done without RBI registration. So he tries to convert it into crowdfunding, but he has no knowledge about that field. He does not know anything about crowdfunding, about social fundraising and such things. And he comes to the incubator for help. Now, so we were still trying to convert it into, get him in touch with NGOs and corporate CSR professionals. But it would take time for him to develop that network where he would be having enough number of social enterprises which CSR funds wanted to fund. So he would have to get CSR funds to trust him on one end, and he would need a whole gamut of verified NGOs or NGOs where he could actually has done the due diligence and they are ready for investment. So as per the corporate CSR norms, now he needs that, right? And it will take time to build, and he's in a hurry. He says, I have this loan on my head. I need to start repaying it. If you're telling me that it will take 1.5 hours to build, how do I repay the loan? And what does he do finally? He finally sells off that platform to some company who wants a lending platform, who wants a digital lending platform. And he sold off that product and got some of his investment back through it. So those kind of legal constraints can happen, especially if the legal scenario of a country is very arbitrary, like in India. There's a lot of things which are not predictable and which are very sudden, and you're not prepared for it. There's also been a case of, if you remember, in case of Vodafone, there has been this taxation issue, which Vodafone has now challenged in the international court. So it is like you have made a legislation and implemented it in retrospective date. I mean, say the legislation has been made today. When I did the transaction 1 year back, it wasn't there. So whatever legislation was existing 1 year back, I complied to that legislation. But today, I created a new legislation. And I'm saying it will also be applicable to transactions which happened a year back, when it did not exist, right? So even those transactions will come under the gamut of this law. So that retrospective tax is what Vodafone challenged and has now filed a case after Supreme Court did not give it the relief. It has gone and filed it in international court, which has given a verdict against India for it. Because in India, with every government, the legislation continuity is not maintained. Many times the legislation changes. And something like retrospective legislation is totally arbitrary, right? So the legal framework also is very important. You need some stable regulations there. Then there are environmental compliances, environmental laws. If you are setting up a manufacturing unit, you need a lot of licenses. You need environmental clearances as well, right? And then you need to have this logistic supply chain where how the raw material comes, how will you distribute your products. So then it becomes a complex operation, because manufacturing is not just a business. Manufacturing is a whole industry in itself. And it has a lot of dependent industries on it, lot of links attached to it, right? So there are so many, say, automobile industry. So if Maruti is producing cars in India, Maruti is just producing a couple of things and doing the assembling. There are so many industries which are producing the smaller parts of that car. So there's a whole gamut of partners who are involved in creating an industry. So if it's a simple business, that is why I said choose a simple business, which is very straightforward. Then it is easier for you to comprehend and prepare a thing without actually going into the market and doing the primary research, for which you can find inputs from around you instead of getting into the market, right? So you see what are the constraints and what are the constraints that you can handle, what are the constraints which you cannot handle, right? What are the critical success factors? How important is a particular thing in running or making that business successful? What all factors can you manage? So those are the things which will help you understand whether to go ahead with the decision or not go ahead with it. And what are the benefits of conducting this feasibility study? It identifies new opportunities. Okay, even while doing a feasibility study, you might require that the solution that you have thought of, okay, that might not be the right thing, but during the course of a study you realized कि जो solution आप दे रहे हो, that is already available in the market, too many people are giving it, but people are not satisfied because it has these lacuna, and you might be able to change that solution and bring in a new thing which addresses the drawbacks of the old solution which you were earlier trying. So it might also give you market insights. That is why I said entrepreneurs should be involved in market survey. Entrepreneurs should be involved in speaking to the stakeholders. The research part and making a pre-feasibility study, entrepreneurs should be very strongly involved in this process, because you will get insights into the market. You will get your learnings from the market, and you might end up into creating new ideas instead of the one that you started with. So it can help you identify new opportunities that exist in the market. It will give you valid reasons to undertake the project, right? If you are doing it, now you know why you should be doing it. If you're not doing it, you know why you should not be doing it. So it's an objective and a rational decision, and not an instinctive decision, or not something that is perception based. It is something which is factual, which you have already assessed on ground. So you have valid reasons for undertaking or not undertaking a project. It helps in decision making on the project, identifies reasons not to proceed, narrows the business alternatives. Okay, so this is when you do it for multiple projects. If you are going ahead with multiple ideas, you decide which one to choose from the multiple things. Improves project teams focus. That is basically, if there are multiple people involved, they all think in the same direction, because now they have solid things, solid data, or solid information on which they can base their teamwork. Provide valuable information for a go no go decision. Go no go decision is whether you should go ahead with the idea or not go ahead with the idea. That's called a go no go decision. Enhances the success rate by evaluating multiple parameters. Now that is a very important thing, that it tells you what the critical success factors are, and therefore it helps you understand what are the different things that are required to succeed in this business, and helps your chances of success by knowing in advance what are the things required, how the market functions, what all things you'll need, and then you start arranging for those resources before you get into a business, and increases your chances of success in that business, right? So this is the entire overview of what we have done. Now points to remember is, okay, so I'll be giving you some format of a pre-feasibility report, but I want to tell you this, that format will differ from business to business. Like I told you, every business is different. Every business has different needs and different operations. Please use your discretion and see what applies to your business, what doesn't apply to your industry or your business, and what applies to it, and you can accordingly modify what is important for your industry or your business. You can modify the format as per that. Okay, so feasibility study has two parts. One is data collection through market survey, through interviews with the stakeholders, as well as through secondary market research. So you have already had a session on market survey. You'll have more sessions on that. So one part is data collection, and then second part is data interpretation, right? So when I said this, I have already covered that a business founder must be involved in this study, even if a consultant prepares it, for first-hand connect with the market and the stakeholders, and for developing personal insights about the market. So this we have covered. Okay, so what I was saying is the second part after data collection is data analysis. And you need to have a very critical and analytical mind to be able to analyze that data and draw right conclusions. First of all, therefore, we saw in the first slide that how accurate the data is, how realistic your assumptions are, how realistic your projections are will decide how right your conclusions are. So because this is a decision making tool, if you have right data, if you have right assumptions, if you have right projections, you will draw right conclusions. Then pestle analysis. So pestle analysis probably you will study in market survey or market analysis, where it is about examining the environment in which the business will operate, which includes the political environment, the economy or the economic environment of that country, the socio-cultural environment, the technology, the environment impact, and the legal environment, the legal requirements for a project. So that's a pestle analysis. Probably you will study in detail in the marketing analysis part of it, market analysis part of it. Okay, so this will cover, there's not much of a thing in this. So these are the steps in a pre-feasibility study. So first you do the preliminary analysis. Preliminary analysis is actually when you yourself analyze what is the actual product or service you will be giving, to whom you will be giving it, why, what is going to be the unique selling point of your project, of your product or service. So what will be the features of your product or service, what will be the advantages of it. So here you are making that hypothesis of what exactly your product or service is, how it will be made, how it will be delivered, to whom it will be delivered, right? And why you have chosen this. So it's a business idea actually that you are describing, why you have chosen this idea, or why do you think this will work. This is your hypothesis that of the business idea that you have gone ahead with. So that's the basis. That is the pretext on which the whole study is based. Then the projected income statement, right? So income statement, I have already told you how you make that. You project you do the sales projection, you make the timelines, you make the sales projection, and then what is the price of the product, and sales volume into price gives you the income. If there are any additional sources of income, you can say that the additional sources, other sources of income, you can add that as well. So that's the income part of it. What is going to be your business model? Basically, you discuss that, how the revenues come, where the revenues come from. Conducting a market survey, it's a very important part. Doing the market research. Market research is done through secondary sources. Market survey is the collecting data from primary sources. We have already talked about who are the primary sources, the stakeholders of that business. How do you do the secondary research? By going through the literature, present online and offline. Then the third part is plan, business organization, and operations. This is more of you study how this business is conducted. If it is a new business, then you will plan what are the different steps involved in the operations. So right from the word go, what all things you will need to do to produce your product or service, to deliver your product or service, what will be the process involved, that entire process, what are the people required to implement it. So you plan that whole thing. Say I am in a car wash business, I require someone who will be running the, say I have a physical setup, or say I have a car wash service on call. So customers can call me on an app, through an app, book car service through an app, and my person goes and picks the car up or does the servicing there and comes back. Now I'll need people who will be doing the services. I'll need people who will be taking the order. I'll need people who will be coordinating with the people who will be doing the actual service, right? So I'll need someone to manage the technology, the app, the calls, and keeping a record of it. I'll be having a person who will be taking care of the finances, the collection, what is going to be the charges, whether it was collected or not. So say I'm just giving a hypothetical solution. This is not how superficial it is. You have to actually go into depth and plan each step. I'm just giving a very superficial thing. So I say there are 5 steps involved. The customer will book a service through an app. I need an app. So that becomes the technology. Customer will book an app. There'll be a marketing person who will be taking care of the marketing. Now, some of these roles, when I start up, I cannot have so many people. So I'll say ki the person who is booking the order and who is coordinating will be the same. A person who is doing the marketing and the person who is doing this will be the same. Who will keeping track of the finances will be the same. A person who is going and delivering the service part of it, and the coordinator of it, or maybe the collector of money and depositing of money will be the same. So I say instead of 6 people, I'll have 3 people who will be doing double task, because when you start a business, the volumes are low and your budget is also low. You have not started making money. So you start with a small team, and I'll grow the team and I'll divide these tasks. When I have more money, I will have more people and I'll divide the task, right? So I plan it in 2 phases. Till I have only 100 services in a month, I will go with 3 people. When my service volume increases beyond 100, that also I'll calculate how it will increase. Then I'll have 6 people in my team. And this is how I will organize. These are the steps involved. These are the things I will need. I'll need chemicals to do the washing. Where will I procure my chemicals from? I'll need a pressure machine to do the washing. So where will I obtain my pressure machine? I have to go and do it at home. So I need vehicle to take all this to home. So I'll need some vehicle in which I can carry all this to the person's home and deliver it. So now, you see, I will, once I get into the details of the operations, I realize what all things I require to do the operation, what all people I require to do the operations, and all of this will have a cost. So that is my operational cost, right? So this is how you will find out in your particular business what is the steps in doing the operations. If I have a garden, I will get the supply of plants from somewhere, or seeds from somewhere. I'll grow my own plants. Then I'll get these pots, decorative pots, from somewhere. I'll have some person who will be giving me manure rich soil, or manure and soil separately. I'll be having some person who will be giving me other additional things that are required in gardening equipments and such things. So I'll have these suppliers identified. I'll have a list of equipment that I'll require. If I need a labor, I'll say I'll start with 1 labor and gradually I'll increase. Once my sales increases this much, I'll hire a second one. Later on, maybe I'll have a person who will be a supervisor and oversee the whole business once the volumes are enough to sustain his salary. I'm talking here about a sustainable business, not a funded business, a sustainable business, which makes its own profits, right? So I will have identified, then I'll do marketing so that people know about it. So there'll be cost in that. So I'll work out the whole thing of how the operations of that business will work. Where I'll do it, how I'll do it. So that whole process will be streamlined. Now that is and then I'll see what all things are required and whether I can actually afford it. What can I afford, what I can't afford, or do I need to change the operations? First I'll do it manually, later I can make it automatic. Later I can set up my own plant to make pots, but right now I can't because I do not have that money. So do I need to change the operations? I can't start with making my own pots, making my own manure, making my own plants. So first I will outsource it. I'll get it from somewhere and I'll just assemble and sell it. So I need to find out how to make that operations happen. So what are the typical steps and what are the different options available, and what is it that I can afford? So that's that whole plan I have to operation plan I have to make, and what all are the people and the resources I require for it. So that's one step, understanding how the business works, planning how the business will work. Then opening day balance sheet. Okay, opening day balance sheet is what is the minimum you require on day 1 to start the business, and how will you get it? Say I require a shop and at least 100 potted plants on day 1 to be able to start my shop, right? So there will be investment involved in it. So day 1 I will have what assets and liabilities I have. Where do I get my, is it my own money? Then it's not a liability. If I borrowed it from someone, it's a liability. If I bought a land or if I bought a shop, then that shop becomes my asset. So those are financial details, right? So how much money do you require is what is there as a opening day balance sheet. When you have not made the revenue, what is the investment involved till that time? That includes capital expenses as well as working capital thing. Then the sixth step is you analyze all the data that you have created. Kitna paisa lagega? How much money do I need? How much assets do I need? How much in operations, what all things are required? How much manpower will I need to begin with? And those things I'll analyze and say what are the critical things. What are the things that need to be changed? For instance, I said, since I don't have the money, I require 6 people. But since I don't have the money, I will change my operations. I'll start with 3 people. Each person will take on 2 jobs, right? Because that is what I can afford now. So this is tweaking the operations to match my revenues, match the money that I have available with me on day one. So that is how you do the changing and tweaking and say, can you meet all the requirements? If you can't meet all the requirements, then probably it's not the right time till you have arranged all the resources. Then only you should go ahead with it. If you cannot, then it's better not to step into a half-baked thing which you feel you cannot execute or you do not have the resources to execute. Till the time you arrange the resources or you get the ability to do it, you should not start with that, or you tweak the whole idea or you tweak the whole operations of it so that it fits into whatever you have, right? So that is the review and analysis part of it. After the data collection, you analyze it. And so there's one important point that you see there. What are the risks involved? So when I talked about financial sector, the risk is it is a highly regulated sector and the regulations might change. So, but say you are entering a small industry like a gardening. It's not a regulated sector at all. It's a totally unorganized sector. So there's not much risk of regulation, but there's a lot of competition because then there is not much entry barrier. There is a lot of competition here. How will you distinguish and make yourself stand amidst that competition is something that you need to think about. Then when the entry barrier is low, also, if your business works, every second house will be doing it, right? How will you stay ahead of them? That also you need to understand the risk. So competition risk, if entry barrier is low, there can be risk of a lot of competition if your idea works. Now, then contingency plans. Sometimes what happens, what is contingency plan? You have a plan A. This is how I'll go about doing it. This is how it will work. In 3 months, I'll be able to do this. In 6 months, I'll be able to do this. I'll be able to generate this kind of money. But contingency is something when some part of it fails or there is an emergency which delays your plan or which when things do not happen as per your plan, do you have a plan B available? So when plan A doesn't work, do you have a plan B to shift to? So that you have to be prepared with. It should not be that if one door closes, you need to shut down your business and whatever you have invested and whatever time, labor, money you have invested is wasted. So you should always have a contingency plan. If you encounter a roadblock somewhere along the journey, you can move on to the next alternative thing, right? So like I mentioned in that idea, he had a plan. He had built a digital lending platform. The entrepreneur had built a digital lending platform. Then a regulation came which made digital lending a licensed business. He could not afford the cost of license, so he could not do that business. He shifted, his contingency plan was first to shift to a business which does not require license. But then he did not have the time frame available. It required 1.5 hours of 1.5 years of building a whole ecosystem, which he did not have. So he had to shift to the second contingency plan, that is of selling the ready-made platform to an agency or a financial institution who needed it, who wanted it developed by someone. and recover whatever money he has. So this is a contingency planning, right? Another thing that I want to emphasize here is that whenever you are entering into a new business, let me tell you, first 2 years of business, you be prepared. Even if you are able to make break even, that's a big thing. Except for service businesses. Service business there's not a lot of capital investment, so it pays as it goes. It keeps paying itself as it goes. But if you are into a product business or even setting up a shop, you will not be profitable from day one. You have to invest for some period of time. You have to stay invested and keep trying to build your business. And a payback time comes generally after 1 or 2 years of being in the market. 2 years is generally considered a reasonable time for any business to establish itself and become profitable. So never think in short term. Always think in long term potential. If you are an entrepreneur, you'll always think in a long term potential, not as in you invest today and you get money tomorrow. So that can be in trading business, where short term returns are there, and services business are generally operationally profitable. So that's one thing that you need to know about business growth and business thing. Then based on the analysis of all the data that you have collected and the critical factors involved, you decide whether you will go ahead with that business or you will not go ahead with that business. So these are the 7 steps that are involved when you do a pre-feasibility study.
So any questions, participants? So I think it's again quiz time. So quiz is in your chat box.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah,
So what is
sure.
meant by this franchise? Generally, people go for franchise of a big company and all. What
Okay,
is
so
the story behind it?
right. Franchise is when some business wants to expand, but it doesn't want to invest into itself, but it allows its brand to be used by some other businessman who is willing to invest or start a new business. When like I told you, it takes 2 years for you to build a business and establish your own brand. Now, if you want your branding from day one, it will take a lot of marketing effort to create your own brand, and you want to start your business with an established brand, right? Then what you do